Joining me now, former Labor councillor and Sky News contributor Joe Hildebrand and Linda Scott. Great to have you both on the desk here. It's good to get the crew together. Now, of course, the big news of the day is the new net zero business. We've got a new target for 2035. We've got to get to 62 to 70%. Now, look, I think it's pretty clear we're not going to make it. I'm not sure if that's a controversial thing to say. We're not going to make the targets we've already got for 2030. Yeah. So I don't know how on earth we think we're going to make this target for 2035. And of course, the reality is 1.3% of global emissions. Nothing that we've done so far, you could say, has reduced power bills in any way. I mean, China pumps this out in a week. What we do in a year. The Prime Minister did address China today.
The sceptics will say, oh, well, the rest of the world isn't acting, therefore Australia shouldn't do anything. Just one fun fact from the Global Energy Monitor. The amount of wind and solar power under construction in China is now nearly twice as much as the rest of the world combined.
It is also a bloody big country, Prime Minister, but we're not going to make it. Linda, how do we make these targets without shooting ourselves?
Well, look, first I want to say it was Matt Keane's birthday this week, so happy birthday. That'll completely ruin his reputation.
Oh, my God.
Welcome to the Labor family.
So as a birthday gift, they get Green Keane on board and then let him put out this report that says we've got to hit 70%.
What about it, isn't it, is that the Liberals and the Greens have teamed up to oppose Labor's climate target, right? I think that just tells you absolutely everything you need to know about the fact that the Liberals and the Greens are now so nutty that they've, come together to oppose this.
But hang on, but the Greens say it's not enough, and the Libs say it's just not going to happen.
Which proves you got it right.
And they're all opposing it. It's utterly ridiculous. You know, when you've got serious business figures coming together and saying Australia needs investment certainty to attract the investment to help with the transition, when you've got a whole range of serious business figures coming together and calling for strong action on climate change, we need to listen to them. We need to listen to the economic drivers to get us to make this huge transition. And it is a huge transition. There's no argument about that. We need to invest in skills to help people get jobs, to transition from jobs in high emissions intensive industries to other types of industries. We need to do a whole lot of work. There's no argument about that. But all we're hearing from the outer ring of politics, increasingly irrelevantly, the Greens and the Liberals, are just opposition to Labor's plans to just get on with a difficult task that the whole world is undertaking together. Otherwise, we risk being left behind, we risk a more expensive, more difficult transition that costs more lives and more jobs.
But it's all good and well for the business sector to say, oh, we've got to do this to get investment. I mean, big business would say that because if there's a buck to be made, they will find the buck to make. But the buck ultimately comes out of the consumer, particularly when you're talking about energy. Everything flows through to you when you pay your power bill. And this stuff is predicated, as I said before, on, huge increases in the next decade in renewable energy. Like, the investment in that is enormous. And half of all vehicles sold from today being electric vehicles. It's not going to happen, Joe.
No, it probably won't, and we probably won't meet the targets, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't try. And look, let's face it, the government's not stupid. It knows how difficult it's going to be to get to that, and it knows that there are going to be physical and political barriers to getting there. We're not going to be able to, put a wind turbine on every single farm, and we're not always going to get, offshore funding for international funding for offshore wind farms. But that doesn't mean that they don't want to be seen to be trying. And that also doesn't mean that people don't want the government to try. And I think there's a misconception here that the punters, that the general public, have contempt for net zero, or they don't believe in climate change, and all they want is lower power bills. Absolutely, they want lower power bills, but people do believe it, and they do get it, and they want the government to go off and do something, and they want them to keep their power bills as low as possible.
But that's
in the meantime,
they're happy for something to be done about climate change. Fine, but they want it to be done in a way
there is a limit to the cost that they're prepared to bear.
That will not new to them.
That's right.
And the PM was asked about power bills today. This was his response.
Prime Minister, you say this will put downwards pressure on energy prices. By what exact figure?
You yourself laughed when you asked that question, so it should be treated in the spirit in which you've done. What we know is, if we don't act, there will be a cost to the economy, as the Treasurer has outlined.
But how do you sell that message to people when they look at their power bills and they, I mean, even, South Australia, for instance, where they have a lot of renewable energy. I think it's the biggest place in the country in terms of use of renewable energy. Also happens to have some of the most expensive power bills in the country. So people look at their bills, they're not going, oh, yes, renewable energy equals lower power bills.
But if you compare the cost of dirty emissions versus clean emissions are much cheaper. Like, my family car died. It was very old. We had to get a new car to transport people around in my family. We purchased an electric car, and it is so much cheaper to run. When you purchase these things, when you come to making household decisions and you do the sums, you do at a household level quickly come to realise that the energy bills from having solar panels on your roof are much cheaper than having a gas fire. I mean, these are just
but you've got to make
truthful economic statements.
But you've got to make the monetary
household.
You've got to make the monetary investment in the first place, and that's what the consumer will cop.
When your heater dies, or when your car dies, when you have to go through that inevitable expense anyway, you quickly do the household sums and realise it is cheaper over a short period of time to invest in these kinds of things that the modelling shows us Australians need to invest in. And again, the alternative to that is a broke insurance agency with uninsurable houses. The alternative is a more expensive Australia where so many more natural disasters kill people and impact the economy and their lives. These are
the report the other day was
choices.
Predicated on the idea that we do nothing. I don't think that extremist rhetoric does anything to help the argument.
It is what the Liberals and many of the National Party want us to do. I mean, many of them are out there this week advocating for Australia not to contribute, to do nothing on climate change. That is a legitimate argument made by many Conservatives in this country today.
I don't think there's any reality in which we do nothing. Just for pure political reasons, something has to be done. I just think people won't cop it when they see what they've got to pay for.
I think aim high and fail heroically.
which is what they're going to do. Now, Joe, obviously you've had a number of states get on board with pill testing. They were going to do it in Queensland. The Christopher Lee government's got rid of that. Victoria's getting on board with it. I think New South Wales has looked into it now.
Looking at it, ACT has already done as well.
But Queensland is now saying, because when they took away the state proposal, there were private operators came in and said, well, we'll test drugs for you. So Queensland is now saying we're going to ban the private operators from being able to test your pills. Right decision, wrong decision?
It's a funny one. I mean, for one thing, I think it speaks volumes about the current generation of kids who say, we're going to do illegal drugs, but it's the government's job to make sure that they're safe. Like, for the love of God, when I went out and did drugs, I took my chances, like a real man. And so it speaks volumes to this sort of strange kind of generation. And maybe every old curmudgeonly person like me thinks that about the next generation. It's like, wait a minute, you want to go and do all this risky behaviour because it's fun, but you want a kind of safety net so you can say, oh, well, no. So I've always had a bit of a weird thing with pill testing, and also how does it work? Like, if you're a drug dealer at a festival, where are you going to go to sell all your drugs with impunity? Obviously, you're going to do it in the bit where they're getting their pills tested and the cops have agreed not to arrest anybody. And so I just don't know how it all works. Maybe they've figured it all out. Having said that, I think the Christopher Lee government is putting itself in a grave political risk because, of course, as soon as there is an ecstasy-related or drug-related death at any one of these festivals where they have banned pill testing, they will wear that like a crown of thorns. And that's different to never having implemented it in the first place. So I'm not massively enthused about implementing it, but once things are there, taking it away and then just, hoping and praying that everyone decides to go drug-free and sober overnight.
Yeah, it's not going to work. Now, I talked earlier about Jimmy Kimmel. Of course, he's been taken off air by the ABC in the United States. I'll just show you a little bit of it again.
We hit some new lows over the weekend with the MAGA gang desperately trying to characterize this kid who murdered Charlie Kirk as anything other than one of them and doing everything they can to score political points from it.
Now, I said earlier you would have heard that I'm uncomfortable with cancel culture, but I think the response that we have seen from some people has just been so tone deaf and so brain dead, Linda, that if you're willing to go out and make jokes about someone who's been shot dead for political reasons, seemingly, perhaps a little bit of cancelling isn't such a bad thing.
Look, when you start to cancel the comedians and the satirists, I think you've got a society in trouble. And look, I mean, I think it's devastating when anyone dies as a result of violence, and I think that's a horrific thing. We can all acknowledge that. But when you start to remove people's ability in society to feel safe to make jokes about anything, I think you've got real troubles with your freedom of speech. And to have the US, of all nations, having a bit of a problem with free speech, to me is really devastating. I lived in America. I went to school there. It's an incredible place, but some of the changes that we're starting to see, I think, are really concerning. And I think it's not.
But what about someone getting shot in the neck? I mean, that's more concerning than a bloke not having a TV show.
Yeah, absolutely. But again, just because you don't do two bad things because of the other. So I mean,
but if the shoe was on the other foot,
yes,
if I made a joke tonight about a left winger in that situation, I'm gone.
That's exactly right.
I don't even have to think about
Sleeping Giants and mad effing witches would be all over you, and they would not rest until they had your job.
So is it bad?
And that makes them a pack of shits. And
sure, but is it
not be emulating that behaviour?
But is it bad for them to get a little taste of their own medicine? I'm not saying this should become the norm. No, because is it bad to get
the problem? No, I don't think. Look, I don't think it's bad because I don't think it's bad as a wake up call, because I think what happened with this, as with the guy from Tenacious D who made a joke about the attempted Trump assassination. And by the way, it was alleged murderer, by the way, Jimmy. You've got to be careful.
Yeah, good. And he was also, what he said about...
But the point is then it just gets worse and worse and worse. And you see this all the time and say, well, you should get sacked because of what you said about, again, mad effing witches or sleeping giants or all these horrendous people who just go combing around the internet trying to drum up outrage so that people will lose their jobs. They're despicable people. They're horrible people. They've got too much time on their hands and they're nasty people. That does not mean that we should be like them just to get back at them, because then what happens? They say, well, you went after us, so we're coming back after you. And it's the same.
But they're coming for you anyway.
It's the same as saying, yeah, but that's what they say. Look, the left is violent. It's coming after us. The left is the violent extremists. They're killing people. That means we have to fight back or we'll die. And then what happens? Civil war, and then you just watch the bodies rise. Either someone stands up and says, no, we are going to be the sensible people. We're going to be the decent ones. Or you just say, fine, just shoot whoever you want and whoever can get the highest body count wins.
Look, I don't think it goes that far. I think the reality here is that what they're talking about was an act of political violence. We're not just saying, oh, well, your words would be dirty. Right. They're talking about actual political violence.
And the fact that they think it's funny is illuminating.
Exactly.
And I think he's got, I think he is.
We've got to go. I'm sorry. Linda, Joe, thank you for joining me in the Man Cave tonight.